All right, we got Levi Combs here from Planet X Games, and it's good to meet you, Levi. So I appreciate it being on my channel here. He's the first interviewee, I guess I should say, for my channel, and we're going to talk about how he got into the business and his products and a whole bunch of other stuff. So yeah, introduce yourself and tell everybody about you. Where are you from? Because I don't even know that.
My name is Levi Combs. I am the publisher and creative head at Planet X Games. I am a native Arkansan.
Ooh.
Be surprised how many Arkansas folks are in the RPG biz, but another tale.
Yeah.
These days, I live in Maryland with
Okay.
my family. Yeah, and I make RPG zines and adventure scenarios
Okay, great. And
for the world
for what?
most role playing game and DCC.
Yeah. We'll start with just kind of the basics. I mean, what, we talked about this a little bit before this recording here, but like because I always like to know, because like for me, fantasy was it was like Clash of the Titans, it was Jason the Argonauts, Sinbad movies, fighting fantasy game books, Rankin and Bass, Hobbit, and then anything that came from there. But those are the ones that really kind of started it for me way back when I was a kid. And then I found the Dragonlance books, and I started reading those, and that kind of got me more into it as well, just as a general fantasy thing. So where was it for you, like way back when? What started it for you?
My RPG DNA is just a little different. Of course, man. As a kid, I loved Clash of the Titans and Jason. A lot of the same movies that you liked. I was a big Star Wars fan. I mean, like when I say a big Star Wars fan, I mean I was the Star Wars fan. I was like that obsessive kid. I had the toothbrush and the sheets and all the figures, and I was
Sure,
always
sure.
tucking mom's purse, at the store, like, get me this, the new guys. They just got a new shipment in. The new guy is here. Can I please have him? Please, please, please. I was that kid.
I can relate.
So,
I think I went as Yoda one time for Halloween, and you remember the old box outfits you could get, the
oh
costumes
yeah,
that were like the plastic mask. I
yeah.
had the Yoda one, and then of course like ET whenever they were playing D&D, I was like, oh, it was kind of that moment.
No, I
Okay.
remember those Ben Cooper costumes really well. My family and we lived in Iceland.
Oh
At the
wow.
Yeah, my dad was in the Navy, and I had one of those old Ben Cooper stormtrooper masks, but we didn't have for whatever reason we didn't have the costume. So my mom made my costume out of white garbage bags.
Okay.
So this great picture of me with this mask on, and then clad in, she's doing her best,
Sure, sure.
um, clad in these white garbage bags with one of those inflatable lightsabers. So yeah, that's really my early kind of geek DNA. But as I got older, I moved on to stuff like a lot of the Appendix N books were in my orbit because of the science fiction book club. There was Roger Zelazny's Amber series and Michael Moorcock's Elric stuff, and then the Fritz and all the different. Of course, that blossomed into Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft, and so real Appendix N heavy youth.
That's great. I think that's pretty unique, because I think a lot of people, I think they kind of came to that maybe later on. You know what I mean? They kind of found out about it. I think it obviously it has to do with age too. I'm 45. How old are you?
48.
48. So that's the thing too, is I wish I was always just a couple years born a little bit earlier. I was born in 77, the year Star Wars came out. So I was kind of like, my parents kind of pushed me quick into watching a lot of cool stuff like Star Wars and Jason the Argonauts and stuff like that. But I just wish if I was just a couple of years, been born a little bit younger, I could have earlier, I could have just experienced them a little bit differently. You know what I mean? With a little bit more understanding.
No, I can remember the line around the mall to go see Star Wars, and then we didn't go that day. We actually had to wait.
Sure, sure, sure.
We ended up waiting until it came to our small town, and I saw it at the drive-in. And yeah, from the moment Darth Vader stepped on stage, man, I was
Right.
hooked. Then on, and I still love Star Wars. So
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean it's kind of weird because it's like the same age as me, so I'm always just kind of like, I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with it now. I love the original trilogy. I'm pretty much a original trilogy purist type guy. And
Sure.
because I feel that a lot of the other stuff, they have not improved on the story that has come from the original trilogy. Like, people be like, "Oh, that show's great." I'm like, "Yeah, but did it actually enhance what came before?" And that's where we get into all sorts of Star Wars debates. But I'll say this: love it or hate it, it's given a lot of people some good times to kind of bond over Star Wars, either good or bad. I've gotten into like deep discussions in like Dragon Con, like in the line to get our badges at Dragon Con, just by people agreeing that the prequels were terrible, or someone saying that we're okay, and then like I think we drove like 4 hours, a bunch of buddies with me in the car, and we talked about it for like 4 hours. We talked about Star Wars and how we hated the movies, and it was like, but you know what? We're having a really good time. Like we still enjoy, even the stuff we don't like. We like, we talk about the stuff we do and the stuff we don't, but it's nice to be able to bond over it. So yeah, I think we definitely, we mailed at the same way. I was a little bit more like Tolkien, and Tolkien was a big, big influence in me. My mom would scream outside that the Rankin and Bass cartoon was on, and you know what I mean? I was
Oh yeah.
gone. And then whenever Return of the Jedi came, I remember I was playing outside. My mom pulled up where we were playing, and she was like, "Y'all want to go see Return of the Jedi?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so it was like, "See you later, friends, and we're going to go see Return of the Jedi." So
That's awesome.
that's great. And so how did you get into role playing games?
So it actually kind of piggybacks off that. So there used to be a magazine called Starlog, and you would always see them at like the Piggly Wiggly or like the B. Dalton Books or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was Starlog and Fangoria, and I don't remember which one of those it was. But in the back of that, there was a mail order form or a thing you could mail away for the Red Box, the original Red Box.
Sure.
Like, I had to have been like 83 or something like that. I mean, I might be messing up my dates, but I'm thinking it was around. And so I saved up my money, and I ordered this cool dragon, and I was always ordering stuff out of the back, masks and all kinds of weird catalog, get all kinds of weird mail. My parents wouldn't know, where are you getting this stuff from?
Yeah. But that's awesome. I think about it now. I think that's absolutely awesome.
No, I mean, honestly, that's how I got suckered into zine culture too, because I would buy these zines from the back of these magazines. But around that same time, there was a family that lived down the road from us, and their their son died. So, very, very tragic. It was very sad. But a couple months later, they were having a yard sale, and there were some things out that had once belonged to him. He was older, and some of those things were there was a AD&D monster manual and a bunch of like toys. There was like the Fortress of Fangs and a couple other things. It seems like that was around the same time. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting this box set just as I'm finding the AD&D monster manual, which the two don't really right. As far as rules go, like they're kind of the same. They're mostly right. The same, but it's really hard to piece that together. So I was just basically playing. Oh, and my red box arrives with no dice. It has no dice inside.
Oh.
So stuff about the the D6 and the D8, the D20. I was like, I don't know what any of this means. So eventually, my friends and I figured out that we were going to flip coins to see who hit and who didn't. We didn't even know what the dice were. Now, thankfully, a couple of years later, some of the other kids moved into our very, very small town. And their dad had been in the Air Force. And he had the whole full complement of AD&D books, and he gauged our interest. And I met these kids in like theater, and they were like, "My dad plays D&D. Come over, we'll play." And that's how I got into the actual playing real Dungeons and Dragons.
Gotcha, yeah.
Just me and like a couple like, "Oh, the Beholder looks cool. You guys fight one of those." It was kind of that kind of deal. Yeah, so that's and and he had all kinds of stuff. He had Dragon Tree Press stuff. He had the old Arduin books, which I still have a super huge fondness for. But yeah, that was my stepping stone, and from there it was just like I was off to the races.
That sounds great. That sounds like a very almost slightly picture perfect view of like how it went. From your the books that you read, the appendix in, and just that getting to find it like that. Mine was pretty much just. I think my brother just showed up with them, and he was like, we'd already played Twilight 2000 with some guys, and I thought it was great. That was my first role-playing game. And then my brother just showed up with, this was 2nd edition D&D. So we pretty much got both the player's handbook and the DM's guide. and that was it from there. And I think we bought like the battle system box, and we didn't really know what to do with it.
Right.
But I loved all the little chits. I was like, what is this? It was a bit too much for me, but I love the little chits, with the kobolds and body left on field or left or something like that. It had and so I just kind of monkeyed around with that. And then I collected the D&D second edition cards. And I love the cards, and I still have them to this day. But no, I think that's a great kind of introduction that you had to it. And
well, you were talking about Tolkien, and people forget sometimes Tolkien is Appendix N as well.
Right.
And I trust me, I read The Hobbit, I read The Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. I tried reading the Silmarillion at the time. I couldn't get through it at the time, but that was another really, really big part. And that and all the pastiche off of Tolkien, like the Shannara book, the early Shannara books, and the Andrew Offutt's Black Tower series, and all that stuff. I consumed literally any fantasy book that I could get at the library or through my mom's subscription to the science fiction book club.
That's great. Do you still read books like that?
I'm not as ravenous about it as I used to. Now my free time is pretty much just taken up with writing, but I read a lot of zines. I think I bought something like 80 zines this last year.
Wow.
So I could a lot of zines. And every now and then I'll see a book that really just hits my interest. Like I just picked up that at Gamehole Con, I picked up that Monty Cook Games Plane Break. Was it Plane Breaker? The one about the comet that streaks through the plains and the tail. There's a city in the tail of the comet.
I'm not aware of that one, but it sounds cool.
It's really cool. You could tell that it's from the guys who helped develop Planescape.
Right.
They created Zeb Cook created it, but they were heavily into developing it. So you can tell it's like the natural progression from that. Like it's their own thing, but it definitely has its roots in things like Planescape. It's very, very cool. Very interesting system.
That's great. So you definitely like obviously the kind of the third party kind of do it yourself type zine. That's kind of what they are. They're kind of
oh yeah.
So where did you go from there? Like I have like a passport. I call it like a passport where I hit all these games. And it's like D6 Star Wars. It was like some niche games like Slay Industries. Warhammer Fantasy role play, like I hit all these things and I've played a whole bunch. So how did you, because I talk to people now and they're literally like, I've played third edition D&D and I've played D&D ever since, and like, you ever played like a space game? And they're like, no. And of course to me, I'm like dizzy from that, I'm like, what, or, have you ever tried this type of genre? And they're like, no. And so was that kind of for you, or did you kind of stick with the basics?
No. So this family that I was talking about that I met, the dad had been in the Air Force and traveled around a bunch. He didn't just have D&D. He had Gamma World. He had Traveler. Wow. He had Moro Project, I believe, and they had Arduin. So we played a little bit of those from time to time. And then, of course, as I got older and started to get towards graduating high school, I was making my own money. Whenever I'd go out of town, I would just look for, RPG books of any kind, just to try to. The little town I lived in had 5,000 people in it, and there was no dice, there was nothing. It wasn't until I think my junior senior year I even had my first set of dice. So it was a long time. I was always having to use we had one set of dice amongst everybody.
Wow.
And
we were just showing their wear.
Oh man, it was great. But at the same time, like you talk about a passport, like I tried Champions, Cyberpunk, all that early stuff. I mean, like we played Bushido one time, Boot Hill. We played quite a bit. We could never really last more than one or two sessions of Boot Hill, but we loved it. But a lot of Champions, especially in high school. And then as I got in the Navy and I started to travel around a bit, I kind of came back around to playing a lot of D&D. So I would play because I'd never played any of the published adventures, like Hamlet or Temple of Elemental Evil or any of those, like White Plume Mountain or anything. I'd never played any of those. And then I met some guys in the Navy and they were like, "What, you don't know the Tomb of Horrors?" And I was like, "I have no idea what that is." So I got to play through most of those adventures while I was in the Navy. And that was deep in the second edition. It was a lot of fun. And I collected a lot of books during that time. I would just buy anything I could get my hands on. And just scour old game stores for old games, and I had big old sack of dice, and yeah, if somebody was playing and they were getting ready to PCS out of the out of the military, I'd be like, I'll buy your game books from you. One
That's
of those
great.
kind of deals. So I guess how you end up with like 4 copies of the Wilderness Survival Guide.
I
So
love that book, man. Absolutely love that book. I love that one and the was it the caves ones, but I didn't get first edition until down the road. Like I said, I started with second edition, and I only had the main 3 core books, and I like Rangers, so I bought the Ranger handbook. That was it. And like I didn't really need much more. But then I like Ravenloft. I like Castlevania, so I bought Ravenloft box set, and then I bought the second box set they put out, the main box set, the big red box set. And then my buddies were all about Forgotten Realms, and I'd done a video a little. I've talked some of my videos. I talked about Dark Sun, how I was wrong about Dark Sun. So as I've gotten older, I've eaten crow about maybe some of the views I've had in the past, and I realized that I was either just ignorant or dumb or whatever the case may be.
just
And
younger,
yeah,
young.
yeah, I'm not a big edition war guy. I know that the edition wars, I mean, really, since I don't know, I mean, I guess you could say all the way back from first edition, we just didn't have the vocalization as we have now. So it's gotten ramped up incredibly huge now. But so I kind of got out of second edition D&D, and Warhammer Fantasy just blew me away. It made a lot more sense to me. I had a cooler feel to it. I had a really cool feel, and I liked Europe and stuff. But did you ever play any D6 Star Wars since you're a big Star Wars guy?
I bought the books, but I could never find anybody who wanted to play. Whenever I would find other people who want, they would always want to play either D&D or just some random game that somebody wanted to play, but nobody ever wanted to play Star Wars. And I didn't want to run it; I wanted to play it.
Right,
So,
right.
but
That's
I love,
definitely that's one of the things about that.
yeah,
And
loved reading it, but I never got to play it back then. I've played it at cons and I've played it in the years since, but just a game here or there. So,
mhm. How long have you been doing conventions?
oh, so interesting story. Well, not interesting story, but what happened with the conventions is I used to go to conventions all the time in the early 2000s. I get a chance. I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we had a couple there, and a couple that were really, really fun, really good. A lot of people were playing there, and I started to kind of get out of D&D. I was just doing other things, and I had other interests, and all the people that I grew up with playing had kind of spread apart. We weren't playing anymore, and then I always felt like D&D for the longest time for me was, or just role playing in general was, I don't want to spend too much time with somebody that I wouldn't go to the movies with. I have to like you enough to spend this 5-6 hour block of time with you. Otherwise I could be spending it with my girlfriend or my kids or whatever.
Right.
So I was going to these cons and I just kind of stopped. But one of the guys I met at the cons was this guy named Casey Christopherson. He's a art director for Frog God. I mean, he wasn't then; he was just a writer.
Okay.
But he's a writer and he's a partner of Frog God. He's just a super super good dude. And we kept in touch because we just kind of hit it off. And he was a good dude. And he lived in Kansas. I lived in Oklahoma, and we just kind of chat on ICQ or any of those old early MySpace or whatever.
Sure.
He would hit me up, I would hit him up. And then you flash forward to like 2016 or 17. I was talking to him and I was like, hey, I've got this module that I've written that I play with my friends and they really seem to like it. And I'd really like to see it published. It's kind of like early publisher dreams. And he said, well, Frog God really isn't buying this, yada yada yada, and there's a lot of competition. He said, have you ever just thought about putting it out yourself? I'm like, how would I do that? I don't have a game company. And he's like, there's this thing called Kickstarter. So he's the one who introduced me to Kickstarter, and through making those games, I started going to cons. I returned to the con scene, and the first one I went to was the North Texas RPG Con in 2000, I think 18, and I just had a blast. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I been totally missed? So I've just been going to cons regularly since then, about 6 a year when I can get away with it. But love them. Just a great way to meet people and run games and play tests and see cool things that you haven't been able to cons.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I haven't been to a whole bunch. I went to Gary Con. Absolutely loved it.
Yes.
Uh, got to meet like some great people there. I got to like Jim Ward, Tim Cass, Greg Gillespie, Diesel, Jeff Easley. Which meeting Jeff Easley was,
Yeah.
it was so incredible to meet him. I mean, to me, his art is
Jill dude,
always
didn't
just,
he?
yeah. And he drew
Yeah.
it. He drew a dragon for me. Oh, I mean, I was like, man, there's like, there's only a couple people in the world that like, really, artists and actors and stuff like that. Like, but like you're a big deal for me. Like you help, I lived overseas and I was kind of by myself, and I would kind of gravitate into kind of grounded by looking at a lot of the books, and he drew a lot of them, and to sit beside him and him to draw, it was so the con was just cons were that was a great convention, right? The first one I went, and I could barely speak afterward, and I'm from South Carolina where I live, and so we go up there to Wisconsin. It's just pouring down snow, and it was like nobody. It was acting like anything was going on, and for me, snow like that down here is cataclysmic. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it was just great. I got to have a great dinner with Greg Gillespie, and we chatted about Bear Maze and stuff like that, and it was just a great moment. And then I've done Dragon Con. Dragon Con's too big. It's not really a gamers con, and the crowd practically moves you in the direction the crowd's going now. So that's not ideal. And I've done some local stuff here. And I just went up to Mace, that Jeff Con, the last Jeff Con. I just kind of was there promoting Weird Frontiers, but I don't have a whole bunch of underneath conventions under my belt. But I've always enjoyed myself at a convention.
I love
I
all of
went to
them.
Gen Con. You been to Gen Con?
Never been to Gen Cons.
It's
Yep.
nice, it's big, it's just not nuanced enough for me. There's
I'm not a fan of trade shows, so
right.
not
There's
for me.
like 80,000 games with 80,000 fandoms, and you're like, where's mine in this group of fans? And but I did get to meet some great people there too. I got to meet you know some people from like Limitations of the Flame Princess. I can't even think of his name, the guy who made Vampire. I'm having a memory blank here. But some people that were just big, influential, for Vampire and D&D and stuff like that. So it was great. And I got to talk to some people from obviously Goodman Games, which is going to lead me to my next thing. So DCC, that, I mean, DCC and MCC, are those like your go-to games now? Is that, because I know obviously I've done videos on your stuff, and you're writing for them. So is it just easy to pump those out, to write for them, or?
I found, like I said, we were talking beforehand on before the show started. I only found DCC just a handful of years ago, and when I found it, to paraphrase what Jim Wampler says, it feels like 1983 all over again. I think he says 77, but
Right.
a couple. But it felt like I had just picked up, an RPG for the first time. I was like, I haven't felt like this playing a game in so long. And I just really have come to love the game, to love the rules. And the whole aesthetic of it is very, very much up my alley. But it's really the community that surrounds DCC that makes it something really, really special. There is, without a doubt, no other community that is as tight knit and close and friendly and open to newcomers as DCC is. Goodman Games, all the folks, all the road judges, and all the folks who work there, they're extremely kind, and they're very giving of letting independent publishers like myself kind of wet our beaks and play in their backyard a little bit. They're very, very open. And it's really the community that has really solidified my love of the. Don't get me wrong, love the rules, I love playing the games, but it's the people that you get to play with, And
Yeah,
con after con, same people, and I'm like, hey, it's you again, like we get
exactly.
to sit
Yeah.
there, toss dice for 4 hours, let's go have a beer, or whatever. It's just a really good community, and that's what kept me really grounded into it.
To DCC, yeah, it almost feels like they're strangers, but when you play DCC, they're people that you want to have at your table at your house. That
Yes.
they want to be that you want these people to be your friend that you have your normal table sessions with.
Yeah, very.
So it's very it's something that is lacking. I think it's lacked as more goes on in technology. We get more distracted by easy, quick entertainment, to all of a sudden have that feeling of here's a stranger, but we're talking about the same stuff. We might be around the same age. We kind of, it's like, I don't know, you're connected already before you even sit down, and
Oh, yeah.
then you're playing a rule set that has got a little bit of some modern fixes, but it's got this wild kind of crazy thing to it. I like DCC a lot. I kind of like play games hard, then I get burned down a little bit of them. Not that I don't like them, it's just that I was kind of like that with Savage Worlds, where I just played a ton of it, and all of a sudden I was just like, okay, well, let me try something else. I got staggered, I was punch drunk from it, and it was like, oh, let me try something else. But so how has it been your products? I mean, so you've got a new Kickstarter that's up right now, and how has so obviously you said you've had nine, right? Nine Kickstarters or nine products.
No, 15. I have 15
Wow.
Kickstarters, and I think close to 20 products.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. Great. So you're bringing those people along. It's, they kind of, they get attached to, the creators, and then they're going to come with you to your next project. So it's a really
I mean,
good way to
I
kind of
hope,
snowball,
you
you
know,
know?
listen, I honestly, when it comes to my whole philosophy around writing and designing adventure modules and zines, is I want to play I want to make something that I would want to play. That's first and foremost. Genuineness is the number one concern for me as far as like my aesthetic goes, as far as the stuff that I like to write.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a period of time there where I would go to my friendly local game store, comic book shop, and I would look at the shelves and be like, "There's not much here that's jumping out at me that I really want to play." Not that it just wasn't for me. Like there was just a kind of a gap in there of stuff that, and that's not to say that things were bad or anything, because they weren't.
Right.
There's never really a bad era in gaming. There's always been some cool stuff out there. I just wasn't seeing anything that just spoke directly to me. So I want to make stuff that people think is cool, but mainly because I think it's cool.
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
you know. So
Got
it,
one, I got
definitely
one
see
little,
that
go ahead.
current run work too. So
Okay. Well, I got one question for you. And this is something that has been brought up to me as someone who has a channel and does DCC things.
sure.
I try to spotlight stuff. I find that and I've done reviews of stuff, kind of reviews. I mean, I don't really think of them as a review. I call them overviews just because I don't know whether these things. I'm not to say be all end all to say whether or not something's good. I think you can find the good in a lot of stuff. But one thing I found with DCC when it comes to adventures is that there's almost as if there's a certain level of like gonzo DCC-ness that you need to achieve with your adventure. And I find that if I see any type of complaint, is that it didn't reach that level. It didn't reach that plateau of kind of craziness. So I think that DCC has it's got great adventures, but they're all kind of wild and wacky to get, separately amongst themselves. And there's not, so for some people, there's not a bunch of like connective tissue between them. So it's always like it's like you're going through like a museum of art, and you're seeing like abstract art that's crazy, but you can see how it kind of works. And then this next one's different as well, but it's also wild and crazy too. So has it been difficult for you to try to DCC your adventures, if you know what I'm saying?
Oh no, not at all. In fact, the latest one, an occurrence at Howling Crater that's on Kickstarter now. That one, if I had been a DCC player when I originally wrote that, I would have written it DCC, because it is exactly that sort of like weird fantasy genre smash up um, um, with sci-fi, like a retro atomic sci-fi, that the DCC and MCC rules very much cater towards.
Okay.
So yeah, so if I had that rules, if I had been playing DCC or MCC at that time, I completely would have made it. So not really. But then again, like if I go back and look at my adventures, there's some that I won't ever convert to DCC because they're not good for DC. They're not really. They don't fit into that mold.
Gotcha.
They're not. They wouldn't make good DCC adventures.
Gotcha.
But there are some that they really very much cater to it. I hear the word like gonzo thrown
Right.
around with my stuff a lot, and I always say it's definitely 100% not gonzo. Like you can consider it that, but I really don't. feel that way about it at all. I feel it's more weird fantasy, and I think DCC is also very weird fantasy. It's not. I don't necessarily consider it Gonzo at all. Like when I think of Gonzo, I think like like some stuff like Chalt. Chalt is very Gonzo.
Right,
like
right, very Gonzo.
Yeah, like one moment you're getting this pop culture reference, and you're going into this room, and Cthulhu's there, and you're like, oh, what what's
Yeah,
happening?
and he's like throwing snowballs at at you, and then you're the skateboarders.
That's not necessarily stuff that I enjoy, but that is what I think of when I think of Gonzo.
Definitely.
So when I think of when I think of DCC, it's definitely weird fantasy. It really is in the Appendix N vibe, like that more cocky and sort of like strange and bizarre Lynn Carter sort of almost ethereal fantasy, like a fever dream. Almost.
Yeah, I was just about to say a fever dream. Yeah,
yeah, really. It has its own vibe, but I don't see it as Gonzo.
Gotcha. So here's your new adventure that you've got up on Kickstarter right now, and it's already, you said, tell us, tell the viewers, I guess, a little bit about it, and it's doing really well on Kickstarter. And of course, I'll have a link down in the description to the Kickstarter for people who want to check it out. But yeah, so let us know what it's about.
So, an Occurrence of Howling Crater is again, like I was saying before, it's like kind of a genre mashup between weird fantasy and atomic sci-fi. What I mean by atomic sci-fi is like a retro sort of like ray guns, robots, jetpacks sort of sci-fi. It's really like a slamming those together like a mash. It's like if The Hills Have Eyes had a baby with like they come from outer space and then they let the baby do LSD in the spaceship. That's the adventure we get. It's very much like an homage to Barrier Peaks.
Okay.
There's a lot of Appendix N love in the book. You can tell that if you read the module, you can definitely tell that I'm an Appendix N kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and of all the things I've ever written, if I had to choose one to convert to DCC, it would be this one. But because of the subject matter, you've got these technological marvels alongside this horrible, wicked family of bloodthirsty crater mutants. That makes
the best kind. That's the best kind.
It makes good for MCC as well. So
I like crater mutants.
Yeah, I mean, they're just this horrible, depraved family that lives in this blasted out crater, and it's kind of like, have you ever seen movies like Bone Tomahawk or
great flicks.
Hills Have Eyes. It's those it's that sort of family, just a chaotic, awful, inhumane family of again crater mutants.
Now you're making me think of Nothing But Trouble. You seen that piece of trash with Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase? Oh my god!
Oh yeah, that's the one where he's heavy makeup.
There's some terrible like family creatures in that thing. I called them. I think I did a podcast called Go 8 Podcast, and I called them. There's like two siblings that are like twins, and I think and they're bloated, and I think I call them like bloated, like dirty bloated gut freaks, because they have these huge like guts, So that kind of reminds me of that, just that kind of degenerate type of Texas Chainsaw Massacre type family. So
very so. Like I derive a lot of my aesthetic from grindhouse and exploitation films. And if you look at that cover, you can totally see like there's a whole there's a whole like kind of hillbilly hicksploitation sort of thing going on there with those guys that are worshiping in the spacesuit. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like a flawless horror movie. It's probably one of the greatest horror movies that's ever been made.
Right.
But I'm way into those kind of flicks, and always have been.
Those are the scariest. The ones that like those could actually be people out there. You know what I mean? Like that's where it's like there could be some degenerates, that are like that. But no, that's cool. I'm glad it's doing well, and hopefully people, if they've checked out the other videos I've done for your stuff, and I really like the the way they're laid out. I like the kind of fun that you have in the back with like the comic. And I see when we talked about you ordering stuff off of like magazines and stuff, like your little things in the back. But we're kind of running out of time here. But is there oh, there's my thing. There's my thing to let me know that it's we're getting close to time. So what do you get into any of the edition wars that's going on?
No, not at all. I'm very much like play what you want to play. Take the game, make it what you want to make it. If I want to play it, I'll play it. If not, please have a good time.
That's exactly right.
Not at all an edition war guy. If my outlook has always been, are you having a good time?
Right.
Yes, then you're playing it correctly.
That's it. That's it, man. Well, I appreciate you showing up here. I know hopefully next time we can talk a little bit longer.
Sure.
Maybe when you got a new product out, and of course I'll be taking a look at this one with the channel. So I appreciate your time. And if anybody wants to check out his Kickstarter, like I said, I'll have a link down in the description. And I appreciate you showing up, bud.
Yeah, no, man, it was a good hang. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, man.